You can think of the keyboard focus key commands to be kind of like your regular keyboard shortcuts, but only much better. Now when you execute a regular shortcut, it would involve some kind of a modifier key like the command key or the shift key or the option key, and sometimes even a combination of those. Now with keyboard focus on, which I can enable by clicking over here where it says AZ, that would enable keyboard focus for this particular window. And now I don't have to hold on modifier keys, but I can just hit the key and execute some specific commands, which I'm going to show you right now. Zoom presets 1 to 5 can also be accessed using the keyboard focus commands by just hitting the numbers 1 to 5. So if I hit 1, it would go to preset 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 would go to preset number 5. Some more navigation and zoom-based keyboard focus commands lie on the keys Q to T. So that would be Q, W, E, R, and T. If I make a selection of a region like this one right now, hitting Q would jump to the beginning of this selection. Now nothing much changed there because it was already kind of at the beginning of the region, but if I hit W, it would jump to the end of the region. So hitting Q would jump back to the beginning of the region. Incidentally, I could also do this using the right arrow or the left arrow key. Now E is one of my favorites. Hitting E enables your zoom toggle, which fills up the screen like this, or it could do other things depending on your settings. So if I go to Setup, Preferences, and I go under Editing, these are the settings for zoom toggle. Right now I've set the track height to fit to window, so that's why it fills up the screen, and I really find that very helpful. So hitting E would zoom to selection. R and T are for your zoom out and zoom in respectively. Now this is normally done with command and the right bracket and left bracket, but now with the keyboard focus you can just hit R to zoom out and T to zoom in. The full stop and comma key nudge the playhead forward or backward based on the nudge value defined over here. So if I set a nudge value of 100 milliseconds and I hit the full stop key, as you can see my playhead is jumping ahead by 100 milliseconds, and if I hit the comma key it jumps back by 100 milliseconds, forward and backward. Similar to this are the two keys right next to these two keys, M and forward slash. Forward slash would nudge the playhead by a value just above the nudge value defined. So if I've set 100 milliseconds, it's actually nudging it by 500 milliseconds. To make that clear, I'll just move the playhead to the beginning. So I have a nudge value of 100 milliseconds, but when I hit the forward slash key, it jumps by 500 milliseconds, as you can see. And M does the exact opposite, jumps back by 500 milliseconds. The full stop and comma key or the forward slash and M key can also be used with edit selections. So if I select this region over here and hit the full stop key, it's going to jump by the nudge value defined over here, which is 100 milliseconds. And if I hit the comma key, it's going to move back by 100 milliseconds. If I hit the forward slash key, it's moving in increments of 500 milliseconds, because that's the one right above 100 milliseconds. And if I hit the M key, it's going to move back by 500 milliseconds. So this can be used with a selection or just the edit cursor itself. We've looked at navigating within a specific track, but what if you want to navigate to different tracks? Right now you can see my edit cursor is on track number 2. If I hit the P key, the edit cursor moves up a track, and if I hit the semicolon key, it moves down a track. So P is to move the edit cursor up, and semicolon to move it down. You will also notice that the track selection changes accordingly. This is happening because I have link track and edit selection enabled. If I turn this off, only the edit cursor moves. This can be really helpful when you want to maintain a selection through different tracks. So if I select this region and I hit the semicolon key, I have the exact same selection on the next track, and I can go down with that same selection as well. So this can be quite useful when you want to copy a specific length and then paste it on another track. Editing regions can also be really simplified with keyboard focus enabled. Now let's say I want to select a portion of this region and cut it. I can just hit X, and if I want to paste, I can just hit V. If I want to undo that, I can just hit Z and hit Z again for the previous undo step. Instead of cutting, let's say I want to copy, I can just hit C for copy and V for paste again. So Z is for undo, X is for cut, C is for copy, and V is for paste. If I hit B, it would separate the region at the playhead. So you can see wherever my playhead is, when I hit B, it separates the region right over there. So that can be quite handy as well. Some more editing-based keyboard focus commands are from A to G. So that is A, S, D, F, and G. Now if I have my cursor over here and I hit A, it's going to edit out the existing region up to that point. I could be anywhere within a particular region and it would edit out the region from the left to that particular point. I'm going to undo that. This only applies to one region. So if I had two regions, so I'm just going to hit B and separate these out to make it look like I have two regions. So if I hit A now, it's only going to do it to this one region. It doesn't touch the previous region. So that's what A does. S does it from the other side. So if I hit S, it would edit the region from the right side. Wherever I am, hitting S edits the region from the right side. Hitting the key D will create a fade in from the beginning of the region up to the point where the cursor was. So I can have my edit cursor over here, and when I hit D, it removes the existing fade and creates a new fade right up to the point where the edit cursor was. So you can think of D as kind of similar to A, where it was working on the region from the left side. So I'm going to undo that. The opposite of D is G, where it creates a fade out from that point to the end of the region. Again, I could be anywhere in the region. It would remove, it would remove the existing fade out and create a new fade out up to that particular point. Hitting the key F would create a cross fade between two regions. So if I delete this and I separate this region and overlap it just for the sake of this example, select that boundary and hit F, it creates a default crossfade. If you like using the Tab to Transient feature in Pro Tools, you're going to love this next keyboard focus command. Now if I turn on the Tab to Transient feature, which is right here, and I hit the apostrophe key, it behaves just like the Tab to Transient feature. But if I hit the L key, it moves back to the previous transient every time I hit L. So apostrophe is to move to the next transient and L is to move to the previous transient. If you don't have the Tab to Transient feature on, hitting the apostrophe key would obviously jump to the end of the region, and hitting the L key would jump to the beginning of the region, just like it would normally hitting the Tab key when the Tab to Transient feature is off. The keys 6 to 9 have some interesting playback features which are related to your pre-roll and post-roll times that are defined over here. I have 1 second pre-roll and a post-roll of 2 seconds. If I hit 6 now, the playhead is going to jump to the pre-roll time and play right up to the beginning of the region and stop there. If I hit 7, it's going to play from the beginning of the selection and play the length of the post-roll time that's defined over here. So it's going to play about 2 seconds. So it stopped around 7 seconds from 5 to 7, so that's 2 seconds there. If I hit 8, it's going to play from the back of the region, but 1 second before, so that's defining the pre-roll time. I'm going to do that again. So if this is the end of the region, it's going to go back 1 second, and it's going to play from there. And 9 plays from the end of the region to the post-roll time. This should be easy to see because you can see the flag right here. Now this can be helpful to check your edits, making sure there are no clicks and pops at the beginning or at the end of a particular region. The minus key switches between waveform view and volume automation view for audio tracks. For MIDI and instrument tracks, it switches between regions and note view. Hitting the N key enables or disables insertion follows playback. Now with insertion follows playback on, the playhead behaves like a tape machine. So when I hit play and I stop, and when I hit play again, the playhead is going to continue from where it last left. And it's going to keep doing that. I don't find this all that useful, so I generally like to keep it off. So when I hit play, stop, and now the playhead rewinds back to the cursor which is blinking right now, and it's going to always play back from there. So hitting the N key enables or disables that feature. For the next few keyboard focus commands to work, you must have link timeline and edit selection off. With that off, I can now make a edit selection and also make a timeline selection independent of the edit selection. Now if I want the beginning of this edit selection or region to align to the beginning of my timeline selection, I hit H, and you can see it just jumped over there. If I want the end of this region to align with the beginning of my timeline selection, I hit K. If I want the sync point of this region to align again to the beginning of my timeline selection, I hit J. Now this doesn't look any different from hitting the key H, but what's happening is that by default every region has its sync point right at the beginning. So you don't really see it. If I zoom in, you don't see a sync point as such. But I can create a new sync point for this region. So I'm just going to click somewhere over there and go to region, identify sync point. Now you see a new sync point has been created, and that little blue triangle signifies that it has a new sync point. Now if I go somewhere else, create a timeline selection and select the region and hit J, you can see the sync point is now aligning with the beginning of my timeline selection. By the way, you don't really need to have a timeline selection. You can just click anywhere in the timeline and hit J, H, or K. It still works. If I have a timeline selection like this and an edit selection like this, and I realize I want my timeline selection to be the same as the edit selection, I just hit O. And if I want it to be the other way around, like let's say I have an edit selection over here and the same timeline selection, I hit 0, and now my edit selection snaps to the timeline selection.